Amen. Good morning. I cannot believe the summer is almost over. I'm not sure how to feel about that. That's amazing, incredible. Certainly, it's exciting to see all the things that are going on and that are coming up. And like Sophia just said, I hope that you guys get involved in those things, take advantage of those things. They are designed to help you to grow in your relationship with Jesus and to help you lead other people into a growing relationship with Jesus. It's our purpose statement as a church. We exist to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. That begins with us, but then it emanates out, it overflows. So take advantage of that, if you will. If you've been hanging out with us at all this summer, you know that we are studying the hard sayings of Jesus. And here's what I want to do this morning before we just jump into the hard saying of Jesus that we're going to look at. I want to give you a big idea that the story that the hard saying we're going to look at is found in comes together to give to us. And the big idea goes like this, okay? It is that real faith shows up in our real lives in real ways, which, just to keep it real, is way overusing the word real. I realize that, okay? Some of you are like, can't you be more creative, dude? Just use it once. This is not good. But I kind of want to stop again. No, I like the word real everywhere it shows up in the statement. Think it through. Real faith, what does that necessarily imply? It necessarily implies that there's not real faith, or maybe not real faiths. And by the way, who decides? Do you think about that? Because one of the things Ryan said at the beginning is he said, "Speak, Lord, for your servants listen," right? That was part of what he prayed for us at the beginning of this service, and he's right. Someone outside of me, outside of you, and outside of everyone else has to say, this is what's real, this is what's true, this is what's right, and this is what isn't. So real faith shows up in our real lives. What are our real lives? They're the totality of our lives. It's the good and the bad. It's the joyful and the sorrowful. It's the triumph and the tragedy. It's the successes and the failures. It's everything you put on Instagram and everything you don't put on Instagram. And by the way, don't put it on Instagram. I'm all in on that. Probably it's more than everybody wants to know. It's like when you see people in the hallway at work and, you say, "Hey, how you doing?" Do you really want them to pull you in their office for 3 hours? Maybe you do. But I'm thinking it's probably just kind of a greeting, Real faith shows up in our real lives, the totality of the lives that we're living, the hard stuff, the easy stuff, all of it. And it shows up in real ways. Ways that make people who knew you before you came into the real faith go, wait a minute, I see a difference here. And ways that, by the way, differentiate you from everyone else in the crowd. And I use that language intentionally. You'll see why. Okay, who doesn't share your faith? Real faith shows up in your real lives in real ways. And where does that begin necessarily? Because it's not out here. It begins in here. When it comes to Jesus, okay, the posture of our lives, that is to say what happens out here, what we do, what we say, what people see, what they experience in us, and all of these things, okay, reflects the posture of our hearts. Who we believe Jesus to be. What we believe Jesus to have accomplished, what we believe Jesus to be doing now, what we believe Jesus is going yet to do, who we believe Jesus has made us. The posture of our lives reflect the posture of our hearts. And I say all of that very intentionally because I want you to pay attention to posture as we jump into this story. There are some characters in this story that I want you to pay attention to the actual, literal, physical posture of why. Because that actual, literal, physical posture reflects something different in here from everyone else in the crowd. So just to be plain, so there's no way you miss it, we're going to meet a man named Jairus, pay attention to his physical posture, and we're going to meet a woman desperately in need of physical healing, pay attention to her physical posture. By the way, you'll see that Jairus and the woman, same physical posture, then compare and contrast them to literally everyone else in the crowd that is bustling and hustling and pressing in on Jesus in this story, because it's different out here because they're different in here. So we pick up our study today in Luke chapter 8, beginning in verse 40, where Luke says this. He says, now when Jesus returned, just from where? 80% of the ministry of Jesus takes place on the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee, okay? 80%. This is his home base. He's in Capernaum, and it's on the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus has, prior to this story, gotten in a boat, and he has gone to the east side, and he's done some ministry, and now he's coming back to the west side. So he's coming back kind of to his home base, and on the beach has gathered this crowd. When Jesus returned by boat from the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, the crowd, that is part of who I want you to watch, Okay, well, the crowd back on the western side have been waiting for him, and they welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. But you got to stop when you read these stories and say, why were they all waiting for him? And what's their motive? Because they don't know exactly when he's coming back. They're all like on the lookout, you know? Is that him? Is that his boat? Like, do you think that might be? Because I'm waiting. Play it out. Why would they wait for him? Maybe they waited for him because they were hungry and Jesus miraculously multiplied food. I mean, that's pretty cool. Maybe Thanksgiving is coming. You know, it's going to be the Super Bowl. We're having a party at my house, and I can't afford to feed everybody, so I brought a truck. I'm going to put a sandwich in the bed, and Jesus, if I can just persuade you to come over here and multiply that, we're all going to be fine. I'm hungry. Would you feed me? That's why I'm waiting. I'm sick. Would you heal me? Because there's not a lot of options for me in the first century. That's why I'm waiting. I need wisdom. You're wise. Would you give me your wisdom? Because that's why I'm waiting. They might have been waiting because they were bored. I mean, they didn't even have electricity. They for sure didn't have Netflix. They didn't have, Hulu. I don't even know what that is. I should know what it is. I'm embarrassed now that I said that I didn't know what it is. A little embarrassed. Not really. I don't care, to be honest. I've seen commercials. There's way too many options for us entertainment-wise. It's overwhelming. It's like the menu at the Cheesecake Factory. It's like a dictionary. Just give me a one-pager, please, I beg of thee. But you get the idea, we have so many options. They had no options. So it had to be pretty compelling to go listen to Jesus teach. Greatest preacher and teacher ever. Oh, and by the way, sometimes the blind saw, the deaf were able to hear. He raised up the paralyzed. He did miracles. So I don't know, what are you doing today? I don't know, what are you doing today? We got nothing to do. We're going to go follow Jesus. I'm bored. I just want to see what happens. Therefore, I'm waiting for Jesus. Why are they waiting for Jesus? For self-serving, self-centered reasons. They're certainly not waiting to collapse and surrender at his feet. And we know that because what's their posture? They're standing. They're bustling around, pressing in on him. It's very, very different. It's different from Jairus. It's different from the woman. So we meet Jairus first. We're then told that there came a man named Jairus who, and now Luke describes him to us, very few words. He said he was a ruler of the synagogue. You got to stop when you read a story and go, what does that mean? Well, it means that he was wealthy. It means that he had a high status. It means that he was highly educated. It means that he was, and this is really significant, a part of the political and religious establishment of Jesus' day that stood violently, in the end, opposed to Christ. That was his identity. This guy was part of the opposition party. His family was part of the opposition party. All his friends were part of the opposition party. This is who he was. And in that, he found his status and probably made some wealth. It was not a good move economically for you to all of a sudden leave that opposition party and identify with Christ. Very bad idea. And as the ruler of the synagogue, he was also the guy that was in charge of making sure that the commandments were read, that they were taught upon in the synagogue. He probably was a major donor toward the synagogue. This is almost certainly the synagogue in the city of Capernaum, which, by the way, I've stood in several times. It's amazing. You're walking across the floor where you know the Lord walked. It's pretty cool. Anyway, if he was in the synagogue, and if, as the Gospels teach us, Jesus often taught in the synagogue, then he's also a guy who's pretty familiar with Jesus. Can we agree? He's heard him preach. He's heard him teach. He's been around him. It's a little town. Miracles have happened. He knows it, if not witnessed it personally. He's had contact with Jesus. Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, comes to Jesus, and it says, and falling at Jesus' feet. Notice what he doesn't do. Because he could have gone this route. He doesn't send Jesus a private message. Dear Jesus, my name is Jairus. Probably you've heard of me. I'm kind of a big deal, so just throw that in there. Seen you around the synagogue. Don't know if you know this, but I kind of built the place. Anyway, hope you appreciate that. Maybe now feel obligated to do something for me. Here's what I'd like you to do. please do not let anyone know about this. What I'd like you to do is after the crowds dissipate, and I don't know, maybe about 11 o'clock at night when everybody is literally asleep, I want you to put on the enclosed blonde wig, and then I want you to come across town at night, and I want you to knock on the east side of my house, that door in particular. I'll be waiting. I'll let you in, and then I've got a really important question that I want to ask you. By the way, this message will self-destruct in 30 seconds. That's not what he does. Think of what this costs this guy. He pushes through the crowd of his town, and they all know who he is, and he falls at the feet of Jesus, a sign of abject humility, total surrender to this man that his whole identity is wrapped up in opposing. And then he publicly implores Jesus. He begs Jesus to come to his house. Here's why. He had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying, which doesn't mean she's likely to die in the next week, so if you could come by this afternoon or maybe tomorrow morning, that would be sweet. But it means she's dying right now, and I just heard that your boat landed on the beach. So he's coming forward and he's saying, look, Jesus, here's the thing. I've run into a problem that my status can't fix, that my money can't fix, that my education can't fix, that none of my connections can fix. Like there's nobody I can fly in to fix this for me. This is beyond anything that I'm capable of dealing with personally. And here's what my pride and frankly my fear of what everybody now is going to think of me can no longer keep me from doing. In light of the significance of this, I have to effectively out myself on what I've come to believe to be true about you. Because I've seen you at the synagogue, and I've listened to what you've had to say, and I've been stunned and amazed and just blown away by who you are and the power of your words and, frankly, the power of your actions and the way that you not only say that you are the way to forgiving sin, but you defeat the results of sin, which is sickness. It's injury, it's blindness, it's all of this stuff. Like you are doing things that only God can do that is actually authenticating who and what it is that you say you are. I am kind of secretly now become a believer in you, and I believe that you can heal my daughter, and honestly, I need you to do it. She matters more to me than what all these people think. So you're the answer to my problem, and I don't have another answer. And I want you to just think about that in terms of your own life for a second, because I think it's probably true that in this particular moment, none of us have a 12-year-old daughter who is dying, or you'd likely be there. But you have problems, one really significant one that you can't fix, and that your money can't fix, and your status can't fix, and your education can't fix, and your efforts can't fix. And basically, there's nothing you can do about it. And it's the failures that you have in your past, and for that matter, in your present, and going into the future. I'm guessing there might be a few. What do you think? It's the way that selfishness has manifested its way out in your life and injured you and other people, and the way that you've been injured by other people, and all of these kinds of things. I mean, to use the biblical word, which is an excellent word, it is the problem of our sin. And here's the problem. We can't do a thing about it. As we've talked about in the past, we can't go back into the past, like get in the DeLorean, and fly back in time and then relive our lives and do it perfectly. And even then we wouldn't succeed perfectly. What a standard. We can't, as we've talked about, go back through the pages of the book of our lives with some kind of magical whiteout and say, oh, I don't want God to see that. Oh, I don't want him to hear that. What about this? And I don't even want to see this. It doesn't work that way. And we can't now say, Lord, typically I would give you 2 good things during the day. I'm going to give you 10, and I want you to take the extra 8 and apply it to the past. Is God not worthy of the 10? Is he not worthy of 20? Is he not worthy of 10,000? Is he not worthy of an infinite number if you were able to achieve it within the course of one day? We already are obligated. We owe him. He's already worthy of all that we can do in the future that is altogether good, and there's nothing we can do to outweigh what we've done or what we continue to do. It's a bind that we can't get out of if you think about it. And yet there's an answer. And this answer has a name, and his name is Jesus. He's saying, come and listen to me. Come and get to know my heart. Come and watch what I do and how I speak. And don't let pride or fear or anything else come between us. It's amazing what pride keeps us from confessing and finding freedom from. concerned about what other people are going to think about me. I'm going to, at some point we've just got to go, yeah, you know what? None of that matters nearly as much as simply falling at the feet of Jesus. And sometimes God does all kinds of difficult things maybe in our lives to bring us to that place. So Jairus' daughter is dying, and even though now it's going to cost him big time, he goes through the crowd. They're all like, oh, here he comes. I wonder why he's coming. And he falls at the feet of Jesus, total surrender, and says, please, would you come and heal my daughter? And Jesus obviously agrees, because then we continue to read, and it says, as Jesus went, and the idea is he's going to the house of Jairus. The people in the crowd, what are they doing? Because we're looking at their posture, and we're comparing it to just fell down on my face guy. They're standing, they're pressing in around him. They're preventing him from moving quickly. And as if that's not inhibiting enough, then we read about the woman that I tipped you off to. There was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. He has a 12-year-old daughter, and for those same 12 years, this woman has been suffering massively. And it may be that you read the description and you're like, too much information. No, it's not. It's critical to the story. This is a perennial problem. It's a perpetual condition of bleeding that not only devastated her physically, but it had devastating social and religious implications in this moment. Like in this day, in accordance with the law of Moses, this made her not just sick physically, but it made her perpetually unclean and contagiously unclean. So what that means is that if she sat in the chair and you came in later and you sat in the chair, now you're unclean. And you got to go through this whole process of now becoming clean. Anything she touches is unclean, and you touch it, now you're unclean. She bumps into you by mistake, you're unclean. You bump into her by mistake, you're unclean. You get the idea, it's contagious. So as a result, she's cut off from the temple in the city of Jerusalem, which is where sacrifice for sins were made. So think about that from her perspective for a second. Look what I'm now barred from. She's cut off from the synagogue that Jairus is one of the rulers of. Can't go in there. She's cut off from people. So 12 years earlier, if she was married when this happened, she's not been married for at least 11 and a half years. If she has kids, she's not hugged them in 12 years. She might have talked to them through the fence at school. I'm not sure. Her parents, her siblings, her family, her career, if she had one, probably unlikely in that day, but we're trying to bring it into our day, so you can imagine the effects of this kind of thing. It's overwhelming. And to make matters worse, Luke says, and though she had spent all her living, so she has now exhausted all of her resources, probably long ago, on physicians. Oh, that had to be fun. She could not be healed by anyone. You can imagine the indignities that this woman had been subjected to through the various treatments of first century physicians. I mean, they were doing their best, but wow. But now she's heard about another physician. His name is Jesus. He charges no money. Perfect. And then beyond that, she, I'm sure of it, has heard how he healed a leper. Why does that matter? Why would that be really significant to her? It would be significant to her because leprosy, too, was incurable in that day, and it made you perpetually and contagiously unclean. And she's heard how he healed the leper, and how was that? He touched him, which is the thing you don't do unless you're Jesus and the power of your purity is greater than any other impurity. He doesn't become impure. He makes those he touches pure. And so she reasons in her mind. She thinks, all right, so here's the deal. Jesus has gotten back. I am at an all-time desperation moment. Like, this is it. If I can just, I don't even need to touch him. If I can just touch something that's touching him, I'll be healed. And so that's what she does. Verse 44, she worms her way through this crowd. Okay, so she's secretly spreading her contagion as she goes, albeit nobody knows this yet. And she came up behind Jesus, and she touched the fringe of his garment. And at this point, Jesus has probably been touched by like 100 people in the crowd. They're all bumping into him. He's trying to get through them to get to Jairus' house. Remember, like, this is a big moment. We got to hurry up. There's a lot of rush going on here. But she's only one of two people in the crowd who have fallen on her face before him. And I say that because the fringe of his garment is at his feet. So that's where she's located physically. And as soon as she does, she's healed. It says, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And apparently, she then just wanted to sneak away. And you can kind of understand that, but Jesus doesn't let her do it. It says in verse 45 that Jesus stops, is the idea. And Jairus is like, we got to go, you know. He just stops. He looks around and he says, who was it that touched me? And now notice this, when all the people in the crowd denied it. Now, wait a minute, you're telling me that none of them touched you? That's ridiculous. Like Peter just puts it in perspective. He gets irritated with Jesus, but he grows impatient. He says, Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you. Like, this is, sorry, but it's a bad question. Like, who touched me? Half of the people here have touched you. How could you even ask who touched me? But Jesus, who also happens to be the Son of God and also knows the answer to his own question, is not satisfied with that. He says, look, someone touched me, for I perceive that the power has gone out from me. And look, I'm not leaving until the mystery person, whoever that may happen to be, is willing to come forward, which creates a drum roll moment for her because, how is the crowd going to react to the discovery that she's just wormed her way through the crowd and infected half of them? And which half? Like, have I been infected? Now you've been infected and you touched me, so now am I? Like, the whole crowd is going to have to go through this I got to get clean process. Like, this would be a class action lawsuit except for the fact that she has no insurance, right? So there's no money to chase here. So now the crowd's going to be super irritated. All right, well, how will Jairus, the synagogue ruler, feel about this? Because what if this delay costs him the life of his daughter? Hint, hint. He's going to be none too happy. So now I've got a very powerful enemy, okay? But most importantly, what is Jesus going to think about this? Because I did venture his purity. Now, I reasoned that there's no way that my impurity is going to defile him, but rather it's going to come the other direction. That's the way it worked with the leper. But nevertheless, without his permission, I ventured his purity. And without his permission, I basically stole a healing from Jesus. And if he's irritated by that, obviously he could retract it. And then I'm back in the same condition I was, except worse, because now I don't have any hope. There's no physician for me to go to. I've made angry the only one who can heal me. And yet in verse 47 it says, and when the woman saw that she was not hidden from Jesus. So I don't know how this plays out. I don't know if he goes, now I want to see who the person is, Are you going to come forward or not? But clearly it becomes obvious that he's going nowhere until somebody fesses up. And so she's like, all right. She came forward trembling. Oh, can't you understand that? Just want to give her a hug. And falling down before Jesus, she's on her face again. She declared to Jesus and in the presence of all the people, so the whole town hears why she had touched him. She tells the whole story and how she had been immediately healed. And notice what Jesus does, because it's really not until he does this that her healing is complete. She's physically healed. That piece is complete. But she needs to be declared definitively healed in order to be restored socially, to her family, to her friends, and religiously. So there needs to be an official declaration, and he's thinking, I got this. I'm going to do this. And I love the language. He said to her, daughter. So like, if you're looking for a word, what could be better than that one? In terms of the way that he describes her, in terms of the way that he reaches out to her. You've got to look for the heart of the Lord in these stories and go, that's who you are. Oh, that's who you are. Oh, look at this. Look again. That's who you are. And when you realize that's who he is, you realize you don't have to come forward trembling. That he takes all comers, guys. He says as much. Anyone that the Father draws to me, I will never cast out. And so he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. It's a difference between you and everybody who bumped into me today. And that's it. That faith is in here. It showed up out here. You're on your face. You reached out in faith in a way to touch me that nobody else has. Your faith in me has made you well. The difference in heart in your heart has made you. Go in peace. But then here it is, and you knew it was coming, didn't you? While Jesus is still speaking to this woman, someone from Jairus' house came to Jairus and said, your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. What is the guy saying? He's saying, hey man, you've really made a fool of yourself today. I mean, you have gone out of your way to make enemies of your community. You have embarrassed yourself. This is humiliated. I'm embarrassed for you. And this is the point to get off the bus, dude. Like maybe you can come to your community and go, I don't know, I think I was out of my mind. It was temporary insanity. My daughter was dying. I would think you guys would understand. But at this point, she's dead, therefore beyond the reach of any healer. And it's time to step away from this Jesus. So either you're going to get off the bus or you're going to double down right here. And Jesus encourages him to double down. Jesus says to Jairus, do not fear, only believe, and she, even though we all know that she's dead, including Jesus, will be well. So you're going to believe me for that? Because it's one thing to believe, okay, he can make the sick well. It's another thing to believe he can raise the dead. It feels appreciably different, at least to me. Like when people get sick, you're like, all right, I mean, you know, you're hopeful that they're going to get better. When they die, you're not hopeful that they're going to get better. So it's a completely different category from our perspective. It's not a completely different category from his perspective. It's not like all of a sudden he's got to exert himself a little bit later. Like, oh, cancel my afternoon appointment. I'm going to be too tired after this because I'm going to raise the dead this time. I'm not just going to heal the sick. Like, from his perspective, he's God. He's the Lord of life. This is no more exerting than anything else he does. But from our perspective, as we try to analyze this as people who have experiences with sickness and with death, we're like, no, death is final. That's it. It's over. And Jesus is asking this man to believe that he has power over death itself with everything at stake for him. Yeah, you can get off the bus and maybe reclaim your, status over time. Or you can stay on the bus, go all in with me, and believe this. And Jairus is like, I'm different in here from that dude who just came with the message from my house and everybody else who's going, oh, wow. So he stays on the bus. He doubles down on Jesus. Do not fear, Jesus says, only believe and she will be well. And Jairus is like, let's go. And when Jesus came to his house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child and all of the professional mourners that people in those days hired to come to their house when somebody died and to weep and to wail for their dead. It was just part of what they did. They were already there at the house. I mean, maybe they had been already hired and contracted. She's going to die today. Get ready. We're going to need you. They're all there weeping and mourning for this girl. And Jesus said to those people who were experts in death, I mean, this is what we do. We're professional mourners. We know what death looks like. So they know that she's dead. And here's the hard saying, okay? He says to them, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But Jairus doesn't laugh. He takes Jesus into the presence of his dead child. And then we read, but taking her by the hand, Jesus called, saying, child, arise. That is the language of resurrection. And her spirit returned and she got up at once. And you say, all right, but if she was dead and Jesus knew that she was dead, and frankly, it seems like everybody knew that she was dead, then why did he say she's not dead? And the answer to that is because he's Jesus and not me. He's Jesus and not you. He's Jesus and not, frankly, anyone else that has ever lived or ever will live. Like he is unique in all of human history. Indeed, he is unique in all of the universe. And for him and him alone, death is like sleep. It's something he has the power to walk into a room and wake you up from. I can't do that. That is a proven fact. And so that's how he speaks of it. He doesn't just do this. He does this with Lazarus in John chapter 11. Go read it this afternoon. He gets word, as do his disciples, from a distance. Lazarus is sick. Lazarus is sick. Lazarus is sick. You might want to come quick. Lazarus dies. He says to his disciples, we're going to go now to Lazarus' house, and I'm going to wake him up. And his disciples are like, well, wait a minute. I thought he was sick. You should just let him sleep. And the Lord's like, Lazarus is dead, guys. And I'm going to wake him up. There's only one with power over death. So what he said was true, but it wouldn't be true if I said it or you said it or anyone else said it. It was true, but only because he was the one saying it. And the Lord rewards the faith of this man, right? I mean, you see it, like real faith shows up in our real lives in real ways. In ways that people look at and go, okay, that's different for you. Like, that's not who you once were. And more than that, that's different from the rest of the crowd. Jairus has it, the woman has it, and the rest of the crowd does not have it. And the difference begins not out here, it begins in here. You know, when it comes to Jesus, the posture of our lives reflect the posture of our heart. So I just want to ask you, and just kind of closing to wrap it up, like, what is the posture of your heart toward Jesus right now? Not what has it been in the past, but like, what is it today? Is it standing? Is it demanding? Is it self-centered? Or is it face down? Maybe a different way of saying it, more poignant perhaps, is this. In what way or ways is pride or fear standing between you and Jesus? In other words, what's keeping you from being Jairus or the woman in the story as opposed to just anybody else? What are you worried about, losing? Like, what are you concerned about what somebody's going to say or somebody's going to think? Is there something that you're clinging to, some addiction or whatever the case might be that you're like, oh, he's going to want to deal with that? Yeah, he is. In a way that's freeing. In a way that blesses your life and others. But yes, like, what idol am I hanging on to that I can't grasp Jesus because I'm like this on that? And then finally, will you surrender to him today? Because here's who he delivers. He delivers the humble. He delivers those who realize, hey, you know what? I've got a problem. In fact, I got several problems that only Jesus can solve. And you come to him in humility and you give that to him. And then he calls you daughter or son through faith in him and the forgiveness that is found in him and the life that is found in him and the new identity that is given to you through faith in him. It's son or daughter. It's the best possible arrangement. It's the single greatest language that he could use. So think about that, okay? What is the posture of your heart right now? What's standing between you and him? And will you just surrender to him and go all in, double down? All right? Let's pray.